My landlord tried to evict me, so I bought his building and evicted him instead. It all started when Marcus raised my rent by 40% on 2 weeks' notice. I'd been renting the same studio for 3 years, always paid on time, never had any problems. The building was a wreck. Peeling paint, broken elevator, heat that worked maybe half the winter, but it was affordable. $800 a month, and I was saving every penny for a master's degree in social work. Market rates, Marcus had said when I called to protest. He sounded like a man who'd spoken like this 100 times before. In the background, I could hear a talk show blaring on the TV and a woman crying. I can't afford $1,200, I said, and 2 weeks isn't legal notice. Marcus laughed, a sharp sound that made my skin crawl. Legal notice? Kid, this is my building. I can do whatever I want. You don't like it? Here's the door. Good luck finding another place you can afford in this neighborhood. He paused, and I heard him drinking something. Plus, I know you college kids probably have rich parents. It's time to stop playing poor and ask Daddy for money. I wanted to tell him that my parents had been killed in a car accident when I was 16, that I'd worked 2 jobs since senior year just to survive. Instead, I hung up and started researching. I spent the night studying rent laws, printing out articles and highlighting violations. Rent increases required 30 days' notice and couldn't exceed 25% per year in our city. Late fees couldn't exceed 5% of the monthly rent. Landlords couldn't enter apartments without 24 hours' notice, except in emergencies. What Marcus was doing violated at least 6 different housing codes. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I knocked on the door of his penthouse, the only apartment he actually maintained. Through the doorway, I could see granite countertops and wood floors that gleamed. His coffee mug read, "World's Best Landlord," in comic book font. Behind him, a woman in a silk robe was cooking eggs on a stainless steel stove. He barely glanced at my legal papers. "Sue me," he laughed. "You think some broke college student can afford a lawyer? I've been doing this for 20 years. Half my tenants don't even speak English well enough to fight back." He leaned against the doorframe, assessing me the way a predator assesses prey. Behind him, the woman stopped cooking and watched our conversation with interest. "Besides, maybe try the suburbs. I heard there's a nice trailer park about an hour away. More your style." The woman, his wife I assumed, giggled. She had the kind of laugh that suggested she'd never worried about rent in her life. Then I realized it wasn't just me. That same day, I started talking to other tenants. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman on the second floor, showed me notices demanding an $800 cleaning fee or face eviction. Her English was limited, but her fear was universal. She had lived there for 8 years, never missed a payment. "He says my apartment is dirty," she explained, showing me photos she had taken, "but I clean every day. I show him it's clean. He says no, he must pay or leave." The photos showed an immaculate apartment. Ms. Chen had covered every surface with protective film, just like my grandmother did. The Ramirez family was hit with a $1,200 bill for excessive utility use when their toddler got sick, and they ran a humidifier for 2 weeks. They couldn't afford the bill, so Marcus filed eviction papers. "He says we use too much electricity," Maria Ramirez explained, cradling her feverish daughter, Sophia. "But the baby needs the machine to breathe properly. The doctor said so." She showed me their utility bills. A $23 increase for the month. I went door to door in the building. 24 apartments, 18 different horror stories. Marcus systematically preyed on vulnerable tenants, counting on them not knowing their rights or being unable to fight back. The Johnsons in 3A were hit with a $600 noise-inducing bill because their newborn baby cried at night. The Ahmeds faced eviction for unauthorized guests when their elderly father came for a week. Students were charged party fees for inviting friends to study. The pattern was always the same: impossible demands, illegal fees, threats to tenants who barely understood their rights. Anyone who resisted was evicted for lease violations that didn't exist. I began keeping a detailed log. Every conversation, every bogus fee, every tenant too scared to fight back. I photographed the shabby hallways, the broken mailboxes, the elevator that hadn't worked for 6 months, the mold growing around the windows that Marcus refused to address. The city housing department had fined him $15,000 last year for code violations. He'd paid the minimum and done nothing. I discovered that Marcus owned 4 other buildings in the area. All were run the same way. His combined property value was over $3 million, but he spent nothing on upkeep and everything on intimidation. The final straw came Tuesday morning, when I found Marcus yelling at Mrs. Chen in the hallway, demanding that she sign papers she couldn't read. "Just sign here, Grandma," he said, shoving a pen into her shaking hands. "Everything will be easier. No lawyers, no courts, no problems for anyone." Mrs. Chen cried, repeating, "I pay rent. I pay rent," in broken English. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold the pen. I stepped between them. "These are eviction papers," I told her in the little Mandarin I'd learned from my roommate. "Don't sign anything." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with relief. She understood more than she was letting on. Marcus's face turned red. Up close, I could smell the alcohol on his breath at 10 in the morning. "Mind your own business, or you're next." "Actually, it's my business," I said. "I live here, and what you're doing is illegal." He grabbed my arm so hard that it left bruises from fingerprints, which I later photographed. "You think you're smart? I'll have you out by Friday. Drug possession, noise complaints, property damage. I'll make up whatever it takes. I know the judges in this town. They don't give a damn about scumbags like you." That night, I called my grandfather. My grandfather had been a contractor for 40 years before retiring rich. He'd built half the communities in our county, invested wisely in real estate, and, most importantly, taught me how predatory businesses operate. "How much would it cost to buy Marcus's building?" I asked. My grandfather was silent for a minute. In the background, I could hear him clicking away at his computer, probably pulling up property records. "Why?" he asked finally. I explained. "Illegal evictions, false charges, the way Marcus went after people who couldn't fight back, the way he threatened to frame me for drug possession and bragged about having judges on his payroll. Send me the property records," Gramps said, "and that journal you kept. Let's see what we're dealing with." 2 days later, Gramps called with information that changed everything. The building was worth about $800,000, but Marcus was $650,000 behind on the mortgage. He'd missed 3 months of payments. The bank was preparing for foreclosure. He paused, and I heard papers rustling. Here's the interesting part. He'd taken out a second mortgage last year to buy a vacation home in Florida. He'd used the building as collateral. He was deeply in debt and losing money. That meant he was desperate. I said, "Exactly. That's why he squeezes tenants so hard. He needs cash flow to keep from losing everything." Grandpa paused again. "I have enough liquid capital to buy it at auction with cash. Want to be my property manager?" The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Grandpa would buy the building at foreclosure. Then we would clean up the mess. But first, we needed Marcus to rope himself in. I set up a hidden camera in my apartment and began to catch him. Every interaction was recorded. When he demanded that I pay $500 for excessive wear on a carpet that was already stained when I moved in, I got it on video. That carpet was perfect when you moved in. He lied right to the camera. Now look at him. Those stains are going to cost me thousands to fix. The carpet had cigarette burns and wine stains that were older than my lease when he tried to break into my apartment without notice. Illegal in our state. I caught that too. He claimed he was checking for lease violations, but really, he was looking for something he could use against me. "College students always have drugs," he muttered under his breath, not realizing my camera was recording. "I just need to find where she hides them." The kicker came when I casually mentioned that I'd talked to the other tenants about raising the rent. "You organizing?" he growled. "That's harassing other tenants. Lease violation. You're out." He actually tried to serve me eviction papers for talking to the neighbors. The papers cited public nuisance as grounds for immediate eviction. I showed the papers to a tenants' rights lawyer who laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. "That's not legally binding toilet paper." She said he could have written that in crayon. But the paper served my purpose. More evidence of Marcus's illegal harassment tactics. 2 weeks later, Grandpa and I sat in court as Marcus's building went under the hammer. He'd missed 4 mortgage payments, and the bank wasn't waiting any longer. A foreclosure notice was posted on the building for 30 days, giving Marcus plenty of time to arrange financing. Marcus showed up 5 minutes before the auction started, looking panicked. He was wearing a rumpled suit and kept checking his phone, probably trying to negotiate emergency financing. His wife was not there. "Lot 47, the auctioneer announced. "A multifamily building, 1247 Oak Street. 24 units, built in 1987. Current appraised value, $825,000. Opening bid, $650,000. Grandpa calmly held up his sign, $650,000. Marcus jumped out of his seat as if he'd been electrocuted. $655,000. His voice shook as he spoke the numbers. The other bidders looked at him with a mixture of pity and irritation. Grandpa didn't even hesitate. $700,000. I saw Marcus's face go white. He whispered frantically into the phone, then looked up, his expression desperate. $75,000. The auctioneer glanced around the room. Most foreclosure auctions had limited bidding. The banks just wanted to recoup their losses. $750,000, Grandpa said calmly, like he was ordering coffee. That's it. Marcus sat back in his chair, defeated. He didn't have another $750,000, and no one else in the room was willing to bid on a building that needed significant repairs. Once, twice. Marcus made one last desperate attempt, standing up and shouting, "Wait, I can get the money. I just need more time." The auctioneer ignored him. Sold to plate 23 for $750,000. The building belonged to Grandpa. Marcus sat frozen in his seat as people filed out around him. When he finally looked up and saw me standing there, recognition hit him like a physical blow. "You," he whispered. "Hello, Marcus," I said pleasantly. "What a pleasure to meet you." He stood slowly, his face moving from confusion to fury to obvious understanding. "This was planned. You planned it." "I have documented your illegal activities," I corrected. "Your financial problems were already out there. We simply took advantage of your bad business decisions." Grandpa walked over, finishing the paperwork. "Marcus, I believe I am the new owner. We will need to discuss your lease situation." Marcus's face went several shades. "My lease? I own it. I owned it." "You were a tenant with a lease," Grandfather said softly. "A lease that included several provisions about management fees and procedures for handling violations. Provisions you had written yourself. The eviction process took exactly 30 days, the legal minimum. We filed paperwork citing Marcus's breach of contract for entering my apartment without permission, as well as non-payment of management fees. He had suddenly fallen into debt since the transfer of ownership. Marcus, of course, tried to fight it. He hired a lawyer and argued that we couldn't evict him from his own building. The lawyer took his $5,000 deposit and then explained the reality. In fact, the lawyer told him, "You were no longer the owner, and your lease, which you had written, clearly stated that management fees were due within 15 days of any change in ownership." Marcus had written that provision to deceive the tenants if he ever sold. The fee was $2,000 a month, retroactively dated from the date the property was transferred. He immediately owed $4,000. "That was crazy," Marcus countered. "No one charges management fees to an owner." "You are no longer the owner," the lawyer repeated patiently. "You are a tenant, and under your own lease, failure to pay management fees within 15 days is grounds for immediate eviction." Marcus had created his own trap. During the eviction process, other illegal activities came to light. A city housing inspector investigating complaints from other buildings Marcus owned found evidence of systematic fraud, false invoices for repairs that were never made, returned security deposits, rent collected from apartments he had already evicted. The state attorney general launched a criminal investigation. On the day of the eviction, I stood in the hallway with the sheriff while Marcus packed his bags. He kept muttering about how it wasn't fair, that we were stealing his property, that he was going to sue everyone involved. "Just business," I said, echoing his words from months ago. "Nothing personal." His belongings fit into a surprisingly small number of boxes. For all his wealth, Marcus seemed to own nothing more than expensive clothes and electronics. As he lugged his suitcases past Mrs. Chen's door, she opened it and smiled at him. "Goodbye, Mr. Marcus," she said in perfect English. "Good luck finding affordable housing." Marcus froze. Your English was always good," Mrs. Chen said pleasantly. "I was just pretending to avoid your harassment. It's amazing what people say when they think you don't understand." It turned out that half the non-English-speaking tenants Marcus had bullied understood every word. They had been documenting his threats and illegal demands for months, just waiting for someone to help them fight back. The transformation of the building took 6 months and $200,000 in renovations. My grandfather and I hired contractors to install new elevators, fix the heating system, upgrade the electrical system, and fix all the safety violations that Marcus had ignored. We hired tenants to help with the work and paid them fair wages. Maria Ramirez, who had experience running a restaurant, coordinated the project. The family's eldest son, Ahmed, who had studied electrical engineering, worked with our electricians and learned valuable skills. The rent actually went down for most of the apartments once we calculated the fair market value based on the actual condition and amenities of the building. Mrs. Chen's rent went down to $600. The Ramirez family paid $850 for a two-bedroom apartment that Marcus charged $1,200 for. We implemented a tenant bill of rights, translated into 5 languages. Rent increases were capped at 3% per year. 24-hour response times for maintenance were guaranteed. Tenants could form committees to address building issues. Maria Ramirez became our building manager, making $18 an hour plus benefits. Mrs. Chen began creating the rooftop community garden she had dreamed of for years. The new Yangs opened a small grocery store in a renovated space on the ground floor. Other tenants we helped began spreading the word. Soon, tenants from Marcus's other buildings began calling, asking for help with their own situations. Grandpa and I started a property management company specializing in tenants' rights and affordable housing. We bought 2 more buildings that were facing foreclosure due to bad landlord practices. 6 months after the eviction, I saw Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. He was alone, telling someone on the phone about how some rich kid grandpa had scammed him. I walked over to his table. "Hey Marcus, how's the apartment hunt going?" His face turned red, like old times. The man on the phone kept talking, but Marcus went silent. "You ruined my life," he hissed, hanging up. "No," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. "You ruined your own life. I just paid you back in the same coin I paid everyone else." He looked older than I remembered. His expensive clothes couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the way his hands shook slightly. "I'm broke," he said quietly. "Criminal charges, civil suits, bankruptcy. I lost everything." "Mrs. Chen lost her sense of security for 8 years," I said. "The Ramirez family almost lost their daughter's medical equipment. You were ruining lives long before anyone touched yours." I pulled out a business card. "Our new property management company. We're always looking for good tenants if you pass a background check. No evictions, clean credit, proof of income. You know how it works." Marcus stared at the card, then at me. "You can't be serious." "Absolutely serious. Although I should mention that we have a strict policy on rent increases. 30 days notice. Reasonable amounts. Market value. Got it?" He crumpled the card. "I'd rather live in my car." "That's your choice," I said. "But if you change your mind, we don't discriminate based on past mistakes. Everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to follow the rules." I stood up to leave, then turned around. "Oh yeah, Marcus, that coffee shop you're sitting in, we just bought the building. It won't change anything for business, but we're converting the upper floors into affordable apartments. Rents start at $750 for a 1-bedroom. His face went white. 2 years later, our property management company manages 12 buildings and houses more than 300 families. We specialize in tenant rights, affordable housing, and rehabilitating properties damaged by bad landlords. Every lease includes a tenant bill of rights in 5 languages. We maintain an emergency fund to help tenants who face unexpected hardships. Our maintenance response time averages less than 4 hours. Mrs. Chen still lives in apartment 2B, but now has a dishwasher, central air conditioning, and a thriving rooftop garden that supplies fresh vegetables to half the building. The Ramirez family owns their apartment under a lease-to-own agreement we helped them secure. Maria now manages 3 buildings and bought her first home with money she saved. The family's son, Ahmed, graduated with a degree in electrical engineering and works for the city's housing department, inspecting buildings like the one he grew up in. Marcus has never approached us as a tenant. As far as I know, he rents a studio apartment on the outskirts for $900 a month, which is more than Mrs. Chen pays for her renovated 1-bedroom apartment downtown. His wife divorced him during bankruptcy and moved back in with her parents in California. The vacation home in Florida was foreclosed on by creditors. The criminal charges resulted in 2 years of probation and $50,000 in restitution to the former tenants. He is banned from owning rental properties for 10 years. Sometimes I wonder if he learned anything from losing everything. But then, I think of the look in Mrs. Chen's eyes when she thought she would be homeless, or Sofia Ramirez, struggling to breathe as her parents chose between her medical equipment and rent money. Some people create misery because they can. Others create solutions because they must. The building at 1247 Oak Street is now fully occupied, with a 3-month waiting list. The hallways smell of Mrs. Chen's cooking and the laughter of children who feel safe in their homes. Sometimes the best revenge isn't to hit back, to build something better from the ashes of what someone else burned, and to make sure the people who suffered help light the way forward. The last time I walked these renovated hallways, I found a note that Mrs. Chen had slipped under my office door. It was written in her neat handwriting. "Thank you for teaching an old woman that sometimes the young fight back." But she was wrong. She and the other tenants taught me that sometimes fighting isn't about anger. It's about refusing to let cruelty be the only voice in the room. Marcus was wrong about a lot of things, but especially about this. The people he thought were powerless were just waiting for someone to remind them how powerful they really were.